What up, YouTube? You already know the Latin assassin himself, Big Lou, tapping back in with what it do with Big Lou, NFZR2, baby. First time you come into the channel, it'd be highly appreciated if you sub, like, and share the channel with your family, friends, folks, peoples, buddies, pals, amigos, amicos, and like us Puerto Ricanos, Boricuas, Jibaritos, Potorros, PRs, Rican say, panas. Also, be sure to, when you hit that subscribe button, that you also hit that bell notification, and then hit option all. That way you get all and every uh, alert for when content is dropped by this channel. If it's a pre-recorded video like what I'm doing here, a live stream, or a short. If you guys don't know what a shorts is, that's the 59-second up to 59-second little clips that YouTube will put in your feed. And those are very important to the channel. You know what I mean? Especially on the growth. So, anyways, as you can tell from that thumbnail, it's already heating up here in Cali. It's about 8:30 in the morning, and it's already pretty hot. Uh, so I brought the guys out, the bulls out here, Daisy and Champ, to run around a little bit, and they're getting pretty hot right now too. They were out here chasing rabbits. Um, so, anyways, as you can tell from that thumbnail, that is. I'll give a little background from the beginning. Jim Crockett Sr. Um, dates back to the 30s, promoting wrestling. I think he even promoted some baseball and also boxing, I believe, in the Carolinas since the 30s. Around 19 late 50s, 58, 59, 1957, 58, 59. He joined the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance. Um, at that time, um, his promotion was called Southeastern Championship Wrestling, I think it was called. Um, Fast forward 1973, he passes away. His son, Jim Crockett Jr., takes over and changes the name to Mid Atlantic. So their territory was North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, I believe parts of Maryland. Um, and that was pretty much their deal there. Then sometime in the 80s, I want to say it was 84, 85, he changed the name again from Mid Atlantic to JCP, Jim Crockett Promotions. But they would always, at all the territories and promotions that were under the NWA banner, to my knowledge, they were pretty much the only ones that actually uh, advertised the name NWA. So, and I've seen a few people call Jim Crockett Promotion NWA, which I was under the same impression back when I was a young kid that was NWA wrestling. But in all reality, it's not. It's part of the alliance, right? The National Wrestling Alliance. You had Georgia Championship Wrestling, you had Championship Wrestling of Florida, you had World Class out of Dallas, you had what else? Pacific Northwest Wrestling, which was out of Portland. You had big what was it called? Big Time Wrestling out of the Bay Area, San Francisco. You had I want to say LA. LA had something going on there too. I don't remember the promotion's name. You had New Zealand, you had Australia, you had Japan, you had Haiti, you had Puerto Rico. I want to say even the Dominican Republic might have even been under the NWA banner. And so all these promotions would have their own champions, like the Florida heavyweight champion, the Georgia heavyweight champion, the Texas heavyweight champion, so on and so forth. And then Ric Flair, as being the NWA champion at that time, uh, from the 80s, early 80s onward, he would travel nonstop. It was a big workload. He would travel nonstop, going around to all the other territories and wrestling their champions. It usually would end in a disqualification or count out or something, um, because they didn't want to, pretty much tarnish, their champion. And obviously, he was the NWA World Champion. You know what I'm saying? Um, and so Tony Schiavone used to start off. They used to start off the show, Jim Crockett Promotions, as saying the Major League of pro wrestling, which it was, because WWF was more like cartoonish, more superhero-ish, super villains, superheroes. You know what I mean? They portrayed these characters to be larger than life. Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, Junkyard Dog. Jimmy Snuka, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Sergeant Slaughter. Who else? What other good guys were there at that time? The British Bulldogs. Then on the other side you had Roddy Piper, you had King Kong Bundy, Big John Studd, you had Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, you had Cowboy Bob Orton, you had Terry Funk. You had different guys over the years. Kamala, you had the One Man Gang, the Wild Samoans. Also I didn't name Andre the Giant. How can I not? How can I forget that? And so that was the difference. But when it came down to Jim Crockett Promotions, you had all the main title holders from the NWA there. Obviously, like I just mentioned, Ric Flair was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. You had the United States Heavyweight Champion. It was based out of Jim Crockett Promotions. In my lifetime, from what I remember, it was the United States title was either in Magnum TA's possession, Nikita Koloff's possession, Barry Windham. I think Lex Luger had it for a minute there. Who else had it? And I think it all started with Wahoo. I think Magnum took it from Wahoo, I think. And then you had the NWA Television Championship, which when I think of that belt, Tully Blanchard comes to my mind right away. Arn Anderson had it a few times. Dusty Rhodes had it. I remember Mike Rotunda had it. You know what I'm saying? I remember Sting had it. Those were in the mid '80s, late '80s. You had the heavyweight tag team titles, right? And then you had and at that time it was mostly it was the Rock and Roll Express battling with the Midnight Express. It was the Road Warriors and the Powers of Pain, and it was I remember Arn and Tully had it. The Steiners brothers, which was a little later because Rick Steiner was there about 3 or 4 years before Scott Steiner came. You had also Terry. Oh, that was way later. But let me see. The ones I'm missing to say right now are the. Let's see. I said the Midnight Rock and Roll. Oh, Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez, and Rick Rude. They had the belts for a minute. Hey, champ, Daisy, come here. Where you guys at? So you had them. So it was a constant battle of of competition, major competition there. Good, and then also good in ring workers. Like Bobby Eaton, Stan Lane, and Dennis Condrey, and then you had Ricky Morton. You know, Manny Fernandez was a good in ring worker. Tully Blanchard, good in ring worker. Arn Anderson became a good in ring worker. You had different big names that would come in through the territory real quick, like Harley Race, Bruiser Brody, Abdullah the Butcher, Superstar Billy Graham. You know what? Now I'm thinking back. I don't remember Bruiser Brody coming through Jim Crockett Promotions in the mid to late '80s. I remember him AWA going through NWA, and I remember him going through World Class, and then also what is the Puerto Rico one? WWC or WCC, World Wrestling Council. I think it's called World Wrestling Council. That's Carlos Colon. Um, Bruiser Brody was a big attraction too. Ex football player, you know, ex football player, now professional wrestler, um, NFL player. You know what I mean? Um, Kamala. Um, you see, now and then Dutch Mantel would come through the territory. I'm trying to think. Um, yeah. So you had those guys. Then you had, and when I think about NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions, I think of three things right away. I think of the Four Horsemen. I think of the Road Warriors, and then Dusty Rhodes. Those are the three things that come to my mind when I think of NWA Jim Crockett Promotions. Uh, as we know, the Four Horsemen were a legitimate faction that was just badass. Badass wrestlers, badass behind the mic on the promos. Uh, you know, Oli, Tully, and Ric Flair. Even Oli more so because he's older. They had a lot of years of experience. You know what I mean? At one point, the the Four Horsemen had all the hardware. You know what I'm saying? They had all the main belts. You had excuse me, Ric Flair is the heavyweight champ. You had Tully Blanchard, the TV champ, or Arn Anderson, the TV champ. Um, at different times, you had Tully and Arn were tag team champs. Oli and Arn were tag team champs. Um, you also had when Barry Windham came in. When Barry Windham came in, Ric Flair was the heavyweight champ. Barry Windham was the U.S. United States heavyweight champ, and then between Arn and Tully, they were the tag team champs. Um, and then Tully would sometimes be the TV champ, and Arn didn't have a belt. But for the most part, these guys were. If you see any of their old pictures, especially from Pro Wrestling, Bill Apner, they were always with the hardware. They had it all. And everybody was gunning for them. All the baby faces. So they had feuds over the years with a lot of heat with Dusty Rhodes, with Magnum TA, with Sting, Barry Windham, Lex Luger, different times because those guys were also members of the Four Horsemen. Um, Short-lived though, especially Lex Luger. You had Magnum TA feuding with Tully Blanchard. They had some good matches, and then Magnum TA feuding with Nikita Koloff. They had the best of 7. Um, and then Nikita was obviously Ivan Koloff's nephew. The storyline, this is nephew. And then Crusher Khrushchev was a cousin that was brought over from Russia. But Crusher and Nikita are both Minnesota boys. If you guys don't know, Crusher is later on in his career he would be the Repo Man, and he would also before that be part of Demolition. He was the younger guy. I don't remember. I think it was Smash. Um, so these are two big huge guys. Nikita got thrown in the big show quick, and he had to learn as he went. Uh, Crusher was they were both high school football players, and I think they even went to play college too a little bit. But you had Paul Jones's Army, right? You had oh man, what's his name? The German guy, Von Raschke. You had Von Raschke. You had I'm trying to think who else was in his little circle. Paul Jones before he got he had the 2 Russian guys, right? He had the 2 Russian guys, Russian 1 and 2, I think they were called, or the Assassins 1 and 2, and then uh you had what's his name? Von Raschke. I'm trying to remember who was Von Raschke's part. Oh, I think it was Ivan Koloff. This is before Nikita came in, I think. And then Paul Jones also had Powers of Pain, who ended up feuding with the Road Warriors, and the Road Warriors were big ass dudes, right? I mean, you're talking, they're only about 6'2", 6'1", 6'2", but you're talking about, Animal was able to bench 600 pounds. He had big ass arms. Hawk was more traps and chest. He was still big too, but he wasn't as strong as Animal. But then you got the Powers of Pain, who these guys are like 2 or 3 inches taller than the Road Warriors. Well, about 2 inches, yeah, about 2 or 3 inches. Warlord was the tallest one, and then these guys were even bigger. You know what I'm saying? Even bigger than the Road Warriors. It's just they were, 6 or 8 years behind the Road Warriors when the originally Animal was the Road Warrior when he first started. And they had those battles, the bench press contest where Paul Jones got all this money up, and They're right there on the side of the ring, bench pressing 500 pounds, 600 pounds. Uh, then it turns into a melee, and Animal gets kicked in the face, and it messes up his eye. But what happened was he already had a messed up eye from an injury in the TV taping. I think the day before, or the pay-per-view before, the night before, something like that. Um, so you got these guys going back and forth battling. Oh yeah, it was the 6-man tag teams. Uh, there was a 6-man titles. I forgot to mention that one earlier, and it was Dusty Rhodes and the Road Warriors. They had the titles, and then at some point, Powers of Pain and Ivan Koloff got the belts. Uh, I'm trying to think who else came through there. I mean, not came through there, but who else had feuds? So I already mentioned Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, also Midnight Express and the Fantastics. Those little guys, they were smaller guys. I can't think of their names right now, but anyways, they were getting it back and forth. Those little guys are more high flyers. I can't remember their names. But they did their thing against the Midnight Express. Excuse me. The original Midnight Express was Dennis Condrey and Bobby Eaton, and then at some point, Stan Lane came in, and it became Stan Lane and Bobby Eaton. Stan Lane was partners with Steve Keirn for a long time, and they had feuds with the Bushwhackers or the Sheep Herders. I think that was that Georgia Championship Wrestling. Yeah, it might have been Georgia or Portland um, at the time. So Stan Lane's been around for a while, and I think he was trained partly by Ric Flair. Um, yeah, if I remember correctly. Then you had Jimmy Valiant. He was feuding with Paul Jones and his army. Um, and then Manny Fernandez was teamed up with him. I'm trying to remember if Manny Fernandez was he originally a babyface and then he turned heel, or was he a heel then he turned babyface and then back? Because I'm trying to remember if when he was teamed up and tag team champs with Rick Rude, if that was before he was partnered up with Jimmy Valiant or after. But then he ends up turning on Jimmy Valiant and taking the money that Paul Jones offered him. You know what I'm saying? Um, but Dusty Rhodes, what I was gonna say too, also on this before I close out, was Dusty Rhodes was a genius in my opinion. He was a hell of a booker. He was able to create some storylines. Yes, he did insert himself, in his later years when he was older. Um, when he was older, um, that some people talk down on, like making himself relevant as far as with the 6-man tag teams, where he was still able to have some a title on him on his waist. You know what I mean? He was able to defeat Ric Flair and become a two-time. I think he's either a two-time or three-time NWA heavyweight champ. Uh, he also, oh wow, some other names just came to my mind that I didn't mention. Um, he also held the TV title there for a minute by beating Tully Blanchard. I don't remember him holding the USA title. He might have, but I don't remember him holding that one. But he created like Starcade, Halloween Havoc, Bash at the Beach, all those different ones that Jim Crockett Promotion had as pay-per-views. Um, and I remember a few years back, I don't know if sometime in the last 6 years, um, Cody Rhodes was either, I don't remember the promotion he was with. It was either AEW or Ring of Honor or TNT, whatever one he was with. And he tried to, and I guess he had a good say so over there. He tried to use those names, some of those names his father had created, and WWF stepped in and said that we own the rights to those things. You can't use them. And so whatever happened, but it must have worked out and ended well because Cody ended up coming back to WWF. So, or excuse me, WWE. Um, but I think that was commendable on his part by keeping his father's memory alive by you know, uh, and keeping the creations alive. Halloween Havoc and those names of those events. Um, You know what I mean? But just right now that came to my mind was Jimmy Garvin, Ronnie Garvin. Um, I didn't even say Barry Windham. I don't think I didn't say. Oh yeah, I did mention Barry Windham. But Ronnie Garvin, Jimmy Garvin, those guys were big over there in Jim Crockett promotion. They were dubbed as brothers, but in real life, they're really stepfather and stepson. Ronnie Garvin married Jimmy Garvin's mom, uh, and that's how that went about. But I don't know why it was, but when I was a kid, I liked Jimmy Garvin. That's not even my style, but something about him. I don't know if it was the way he talked or it was his swag. I don't know, but I liked him as a wrestler. I liked him, and Jimmy Garvin, he had been around a lot. AWA, World Class, you know what I mean? He had been around. Ronnie Garvin too. Ronnie Garvin was able to beat Flair one of those years and become the NWA champ. But a lot of those guys, such as Dusty Rhodes, Ronnie Garvin, different guys like that, they did not want to take on the responsibility of being the NWA heavyweight champion for a long period of time, because then they were responsible and they were they were on the hook to make all those appearances, that nonstop traveling. That's why Ric Flair, it worked out so well for Ric Flair, because Ric Flair, that was his style, that was his lifestyle. That's another thing. Speaking about Ric Flair, and I brought up Magnum TA a little bit earlier. If you guys haven't seen the Magnum TA video I already did about 2 weeks ago, go check it out. Also, check out the Darker Side of the Ring. Dark Side of the Ring. It was an episode on Magnum TA. I believe that's the only episode they've done thus far that the wrestlers alive still. But if Magnum TA never had that career-ending car accident, what would have been? You know what I'm saying? What would have came out of that? You know what I mean? What would have came out of uh in other words, if he didn't get injured, they were pushing him big to become the NWA heavyweight champion. You know what I mean? So what would have came out of that? Would he have became, obviously Ric Flair wouldn't have been champion over and over again the way he was, or not 16 time, 18 time, whatever he was. You know, what would have changed so the guys that are involved is Sting, Ric Flair, Magnum TA, obviously, uh, probably, yeah, I would say it was those three guys, in the mid to late '80s. You know what I'm saying? Because Magnum TA had that accident in '86, so obviously, like I said, they were pushing him big. Oh, and Nikita Koloff, I would say, where would that place him? Because they say that if you hold the USA title, the U.S. heavyweight title, that you're the number one contender for the world NWA title. Um, so Nikita was he held that belt too. You know what I mean? And Barry Windham too. So it's just curious to see. I mean, well, yeah, kind of. I guess there's a little bit of curiosity there about what would have if that car accident didn't happen. You know what I mean? Um, just something to think about. You know what I mean? If you guys are ever curious, think about that. What do try to change the scenarios in your mind and figure out what do you think, the Booker would have pushed, for what outcomes. Very, very interesting in my opinion. But nonetheless, what I was gonna say was that NWA wrestling, I used to Jim Crockett promotion, I used to go to my dad's on the weekends when I would visit as a little kid, and he had it already set up for Jim Crockett promotion, and then he would have it marked on the cable box. 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, whatever, Saturday night, da-da-da, boom, and right over the button, and then uh, on the ESPN button for AWA wrestling. And so I used to watch those, you know what I mean? And then only time I watched WWF on the weekend was if I didn't go to my dad's for that weekend. But that was very rare in between. Probably out of the 52 weeks, 52 weekends, I probably easy, easy, easy 38, 40 times I was there. You know what I mean? And so I would watch WWF only on Saturday night. I think it was called Saturday night something, right? I would watch WWF on that Saturday night, but I did catch every Monday the Gorilla Monsoon and Bobby the Brain Heenan. They hosted the show, and they were like in the studio. Sometimes some wrestlers would join them in the studio, and they had their own desks, and they would go over whatever the pay-per-view was for that weekend. They would go speak about the results, and they would also speak about house shows, ones that weren't televised. They were recorded but not televised. They would show little clips of those and then talk about it. You know what I mean? And so I used to catch that every Monday night. Was that Monday night, or it might have been Sunday night? Sunday night. Yeah, it might have been Sunday night. If not, it was Monday night for sure. And so that was something good, that I used to enjoy watching. But I used to watch the WWF cartoon on Saturday mornings. You know what I mean? Wrestling was my shit, man. I loved wrestling. You know what I mean? And then I used to get religiously. I would get the pro wrestling magazine, and so that's how I was aware of that Von Erichs and Jerry the King Lawler and Dr. Def Steve Williams and different guys from different promotions that were champs. You know what I mean? Carlos Colon, Hercules, Hercules Ayala, um, Abdullah the Butcher, Bruiser Brody, uh, Chris Adams. You know what I mean? Guys out of Georgia, Championship Wrestling. Guys out of Championship Wrestling of Florida. Um, and that's what I was gonna say too. Is that if any of you guys were into it too, like I was, you would see the same wrestlers that would be in Georgia Championship Wrestling, and they would be in Championship Wrestling of Florida and in Jim Crockett Mid Atlantic. They would be they would be simultaneously week to week in each territory on TV. Um, and that's because they were all up under an NWA banner. But Ole was the booker for Georgia, and he was the booker for Jim Crockett for a while at the same time. And then Dusty was the booker for Florida, and then he became the booker for Jim Crockett. But they were. Oh wait, let me rephrase that. First, Jim Crockett bought out Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then I believe they bought Championship Wrestling of Florida after Eddie Graham passed and all that. And I know Mike Graham. I don't know if Mike Graham started working for the Crockett's before they sold it to Ted Turner or if it was after, but he became part of the booking committee. I believe it was Mike Graham. It was Superstar Bill Dundee, Ric Flair. I think Greg Gagne was on there. Kevin Sullivan. And so, that's why a lot of people talk shit about Ric Flair because he was part of the booking committee. But if you got 6, 7 guys on the booking committee and one guy's word ain't going to be all, it's got to be, I'm pretty sure they did a majority vote. So basically, it's just, a lot of people hate on Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, because of the positions they were in. Those guys wanted to be the heavyweight champion. Those guys wanted to be, they wanted everything to fall perfect for them. And, unfortunately, yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm pretty sure Dusty did a lot of things that were backwards or, things like that. I'm pretty sure Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan did have little different attitudes and things about different things that rubbed people the wrong way. I'm pretty sure, a lot of people hate on Hulk Hogan too because he had the creator, the clause in his contract where he was basically he could say yes or no to doing things. And I think he also had a creative clause in his contract. So a lot of guys didn't like that. They're like they just feel like they're being treated less than or something. You know what I mean? Which I get it too, but since a lot of it you can just tell is hating. It's just nothing more than hating. You know what I mean? But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and tap on out. It's just a little bit of runbacks about NWA, Jim Crockett Promotions. I think I'm gonna do another one on AWA, maybe World Class, and then I don't really think there's a need to do Championship Wrestling in Florida and Georgia Championship Wrestling because all these guys that I just named now for Jim Crockett Promotions were the same guys that were there. The only ones I didn't mention were probably Blackjack Mulligan, Superstar Billy Graham, Purple Haze, Bob Root, probably a couple more, but majority of the guys I've already named them. You know what I mean? So I don't think there's really a reason to do those. I probably would do, like I said, AWA. I might do Mid South and then probably World Class, and that's probably it on the territories for me. Because the other ones is I can't speak on from like my own personal knowledge. You know what I mean? From watching, so I'll probably leave the rest alone. But with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and tap on out. It's getting really warm. Get these guys out of this sun and upload this video. Have a good one.